You tuned into another episode of Not the Average Local Rapper, hosted by yours truly, Short Rich. This episode, man, it's gonna be a little fun, man. Take it down memory lane and talk about how everything is evolved. You know what I mean? Like the evolution of all this rap shit. In my time doing it, at least. I've been rapping and doing music for about 20 years. Little over 20 years. I guess I started back in like 2003, going into 2004, and I just want like just kind of reflect on how much it's changed. But for the people that started around the time that I did, or before, or a little bit after, like I just want to remind y'all and myself that like as much as things have changed, like it hasn't completely changed. It's still things that we can apply to what's going on now that we used to do back then. Like the main thing that's changed about it is just like the whole technology and the advance of the internet and like like the introduction of social media and streaming and all that shit. Like we can remember it was a time when it wasn't none of that. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of like what I want to talk about. Because it might be some younger people listening to this, and it might kind of give them a history lesson. It might be some like I said, some people around my age or people that's been doing it as long as I have, and we can just reflect, what I mean, about how I used to be, man. It's real interesting to think about all the differences, and 20 years, it sounds like a long time, but to me, it doesn't really felt like a long time. I started doing music like right around the time I graduated high school. Maybe started getting into it like just a little bit before I graduated, and like um, once I got out of school, you know what I mean? It was like, I was working and all of that, but it's like I just didn't really have much else to do. So, I just really took to music. Like me and a friend of mine, from high school. Well, he's still my boy to this day. But like when we was hanging back in high school, he told me like one day, like, cause we used to hang with another dude who used to record his homeboys at his crib on his computer. They would do music, some cats. We all went to school together, and me and my homeboy would be over there just, watching all that shit. And, I wasn't thinking too much of it, you know what I mean? I'm just like, oh, all right, they in here doing they rap shit. And when we leave, and we riding this shit, my homeboy like, man, we should be doing this shit. And I'm like, doing what? You know what I mean? He like, we could be rapping and shit. Like they doing this shit, we could be doing this shit. I'm like, who? I'm like, I'm not no rapper. Like, nah, I don't do that. And he just kind of like eventually you talk me into like giving that shit a shot. As far as like we would just go this were age race show. You know what I mean? We used to go on LimeWire on the old ass computer, man, and we download instrumentals, and then we'll burn instrumental CDs and shit, and just ride around playing the instrumental CDs and just freestyle to them and shit, and that's just kind of where I got the the interest in rapping. Like it was something that I never really thought about doing until we just kind of what I mean, was doing it for fun that day, but it felt like it was something that I enjoyed doing, man. It was kind of like playing a new sport and feel like, man, I feel like I could be a natural at this. I just need to work on it and get better at the skills and the fundamentals and shit. So that's what I did, man. And my homeboy, he ended up eventually moving, what I mean, across the country and shit. So it was like I just had more time, to to just, focus on, what I was gonna do with that shit. So that was about like '03, '04, like I said. So um I had, well, my mother's computer, you know what I mean? Like she had got a computer probably like around that time, like I said, when I graduated, we got our first computer and shit. And with the dial up internet, like I said, it's ready to be funny, man. I'm ready to take it back, man. It was the dial up internet, you know what I mean? Where it was like shit, you couldn't even talk on the phone when you was on the internet. So a lot of times, I had to get off the phone or get off the computer and shit so moms can get on the phone and shit. But at times I was able to use the internet. So it's like '03, '04. It was like, so I guess how I started really, getting deeper into the music was like when me and my boy, the same one, I started rapping with, we used to be on the AOL instant messenger shit, you know what I mean? And sometimes, like we would just out of boredom, we teenagers, man. So just out of boredom, we go hop in the chat rooms and shit and just, talk dumb shit, you know what I mean, with people in the chat rooms that be from other places and shit. And I remember, hopping in like certain chat rooms and there would be like cats in there like typing rhymes out and kind of like, battling each other or kind of like ciphering and shit with the rhymes typed out and shit. So I'm like, damn, yo, like that's crazy, you know what I mean? I was always into writing, you know what I mean, before I got into rap, because I used to do other stuff like, journalism and poetry and shit. So I thought that shit was cool for real. So, I'll hop in the AOL instant messenger chats and start, you know what I'm saying, like typing the rhymes out and shit. So then I end up meeting like, certain individuals in there that kind of ended up being like a group of people that did this shit amongst themselves, pretty much like on a daily. So I end up, hopping in the chats with them, pretty much every day from that point. Like, and that's where one of the dudes, was already like kind of deep into recording music and, he was designing covers and, he was putting his shit up on SoundClick, you know what I mean? If you remember SoundClick, which is kind of like SoundCloud and YouTube before all of that, you had SoundClick, and that's where people go on there and get the beats, and the producers will sell their beats, and artists will post their music, just like I said, just like SoundCloud and YouTube. But prior to all that shit being out, you had SoundClick. So like the cat from the AOL chat room, he was already hip to, putting shit up on SoundClick and, making his covers and dropping these albums and shit. So, just off the muscle, man, like, he kind of got me hip to everything. He put me on to this recording software that I still use to this day, man. You know what I mean? The recording software I use is over 20 years old, man. You know what I'm saying? And, of course I could upgrade, like, and a lot of people eyes I should have been upgraded, but that's like a whole nother conversation. But, so yo got me hip, you know what I mean? Everything as far as like, how to, record music. So boom, from there I start recording music, collaborating with them and shit. We sending the songs back and forth. You know what I mean? So like, and then they going up on SoundClick. So like, that was kind of how we was rocking in the beginning, but you just didn't have social media yet. So it was like, you would post these songs up there, but the only way people was really gonna find you was either if you told them about it in person, or told them where to go find it, or like, you know what I mean? It was only certain ways people really was still gonna find out about your music, you know what I mean? In the early 2000s and mid 2000s and shit. So, you had that, and then, it was also like, what they call forums and shit. Like, I used to go on one called, realestniggas.com, and you go on there, you could download music and like, on some pirates and shit, and torrents and all that shit. You go on there, download all type of shit. You know, if you was around in that time, you hit the one I'm talking about. But you know what I'm saying? But also on these forums and shit, you will have like sections where like, you know, people being there posting their music and shit like that. So, you know what I mean? That was like something else that I was kind of getting into, and it put me in the, you know, crossed me, you know, had me crossing paths with, you know what I mean, people I eventually ended up working with real heavy and shit. So, you know what I mean? That was kind of what was going on like in the early, you know, mid 2000s and shit. And then I say probably around like, shit, 2005, 2006, that's when like the MySpace shit started, you know what I mean, coming around. And like, you know, of course, like everybody was going crazy, you know, with the MySpace shit, anybody was. But then you had like the artist pages where, you know, you could post up, I think, like shit, like 5 songs on there, you know what I mean? And that was really where I kind of got my breakthrough as far as like getting known amongst like, you know, like on some local shit, and even, you know, like outside of that, you know what I mean? Because, you know, that MySpace was like, you know, like the first real like pop and social media, you know what I mean? So you had the MySpace kickoff, and then like, you know, around that time, I think, you know, maybe '06, '07, that's when motherfuckers started kind of getting hip to like YouTube and shit, you know what I mean? And like, you know what I mean? It was, you know what I mean? YouTube still wasn't really like a, you know what I mean, real heavy like that, but like it started coming around probably like '07, '08. Motherfuckers was starting to, you know what I mean, throw shit up on there a little bit, but not like songs, more like videos, because you had like the whole like rapping on camera, like the kind of like the DVD era, what they call it, you know what I mean, where like, you know, you would, somebody had video camera, you know, wasn't even camera phone, because camera phones, you know what I mean, was kind of just getting started, but it wasn't to the point where like you could do stuff like that, you know what I mean, like you can now record like a whole video on your phone and shit. Like it wasn't, they weren't, them camera phones weren't really built like that. So you know what I'm saying, we, you know, had somebody with a real video camera, you know what I mean, you just rap your verse on there or whatever, and hope you got enough memory on your memory card and all that shit. But you know what I'm saying, then, you know, we was still, you know, pushing like the CDs and the mixtapes and all that shit, like and just trying to like, you know, that I say that, see, I think that was probably like the best era for me, because it was like I had it like the traffic both ways, yo. Like, you know what I'm saying? I had like the MySpace part was like the internet part, you know what I mean? Like it was like a lot of people fucking with me on the MySpace tip, you know what I mean? Because when motherfuckers wasn't outside, as you would call it now, like they would be on MySpace and shit. Because you still couldn't really get on like shit from the phone like that. You still had to be on like a computer for real. So motherfuckers would be on the computer, you know what I mean? You know, they on the MySpace, you know what I mean? So shit was popping on MySpace, but then, you know, when you outside, so to speak, you know what I mean, you still pushing the CDs and, you know what I mean, dropping these mixtapes and shit. So it's like you hitting them from both angles and shit. And you know what I mean? Then it was like, you know, around that time, '07, '08, you know what I mean? Probably a couple years after I started really, you know what I mean, started picking up the pace, is when, you know, like the radio thing came into play. Like, you know, I'm in Maryland, so, you know, we had a couple radio stations and shit that would, you know, give local rappers a shot at, you know, getting their music on there or whatever. So, you know, me personally, like, you know, and everybody wasn't really making it to radio, but it definitely wasn't as many people doing music back then either. So, you know, it's like I I got, you know, played on you know, one station here in Baltimore, 92Q. If you're from here, you already know about 92Q. It's probably like the biggest, you know, urban music radio station in the state. And then you know, following the following years when you know, I had a joint get played on 98.9 in Salisbury, which is, you know, the biggest urban station, or was one of them at the time, on the Eastern Shore. You know what I mean? I was based out of Salisbury, so You know, like the radio was like something that, you know what I mean, would just, it was probably like, I say maybe like, I don't want to say it would make you the equivalent of viral back then, but kind of like on some local shit. You know, that was like how you really got known on a larger scale locally, was like, you know what I mean, trying to get some type of radio motion. But you know what I mean? So that was like, you know, probably like the mid late 2000s, and then, you know, you get like into the late 2000s and shit, probably like I say between like '08 and 2011, you know what I mean? Like that piff was real heavy. That piff was real heavy, man, especially for me in like '08, you know what I mean? I had dropped a mixtape that ended up being on the front page, you know what I mean? It's one of the top mixtapes that weekend, I think, you know what I mean? And it was just like that piff could really get you some traffic, you know what I mean? If you was able to, you know, twerk it a certain way and shit on there. But you know, you had like the Dat Piff and then the SoundCloud and shit. That's kind of when I started getting hit. The SoundCloud was probably around that time, maybe a little later after Dat Piff and shit, because you know, I had several mixtapes on Dat Piff. And you know, I'm speaking on myself, but I think, you know, it's pretty much how every artist was having to do it at that time, because you know, every artist tend to go like in the same direction, because there's really only so many directions you can go in when you haven't, you know, established yourself yet, and you up and coming, and you know what they call a local rapper for real. So, um, you know what I mean? You had like the Dat Piff and the SoundCloud, but then that's when like the social media started picking up a little bit more. That's when the introduction of Facebook and Twitter and all that shit came around, and you know, you was able to, you know, promote your music on there, and you know, just hit like a wider range of people and shit. So you know, when that social media era came around, that's like, you know, when and that's also, you know, when YouTube, you know what I mean, got, you know, real heavy, like, you know what I mean, in full effect and shit. So it's like you add all these things, that's kind of like where it made that big transition, because it's starting to be more internet, it's starting to be more phone. You know what I mean? It's like you 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 able to start going on YouTube more and listening to songs that you would normally have to go get like a mix CD for. Like that's when the CD started becoming obsolete. You know, as far as like, you know, on a well, like a mainstream scale. You know what I mean? You was able to start, you know, download these songs and purchasing them through the phone and all that shit. So, you know, once that started happening with like the the mainstream artists, it was like it eventually trickled down to the independent artists, where like, you know, they could eventually do the same shit. So like that's where, I mean, I know cats still pushing CDs to this day, man, and you know, shout out to them, man, cause like that, you still delivering like the essence of that great time for real. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And then I don't want to look at it as being obsolete, but I think, you know, for the most part, we all kind of gotta go with like, you know, with the majority of what's going on, because like, you know, that's really the only way most people know. It's like what's going on at the time and shit. So, you know, it was just like, you know, as social media started coming into play, start seeing more music videos from artists, and you know, visuals as they call it, like you know, cause like music videos, it was like certain people was having music videos like in, you know, the early mid 2000s, but it was like the only place where you was really gonna try to get that shit was on like an actual TV station and shit. You know, like I knew cats that was trying to push to get shit on BET, MTV, VH1, all that shit, but you know, like the internet just kind of like replaced all those other media outlets and shit, the media sources and shit. So I mean, that's where like that real big transition came in. And then, you know, like you just fast forward to present, and it's like, you know, we just full blown social media. You know, the streaming of the music is like where shit really, you know, changed, like dramatically as well. Like CDs became obsolete, and then you could start doing like the downloads and shit. And now it's just like you could just straight stream everything anytime you want, straight from the phone. And then if you got one of these apps, premium type apps, what I mean, you just play whatever, whenever type shit. And then like all this other content, what I mean, that people is doing now and that's popular now. It can all like draw these people to your music. What I mean, you could be on one of these social media platforms doing some other shit. What I mean, or have your music playing and some other shit that you doing, and it's like you pretty much handling a couple different things at one time. So I mean that's like a big thing now. What I mean? It's something I'm actually trying to get better at myself, is making more content besides actually just dropping the music. What I mean? Trying to do things that I can incorporate with the music. What I mean? And I'm peeping shit. What I mean? I'm taking notes from other artists. That I not so much artists, but other creators, better yet, that I work with. What I mean? I definitely be soaking the game up from them. Whether they know it or not. What I mean? And it's just like those are times we in, man. Like it's like everybody's damn near like their own like channel. What I mean? That source of entertainment, if you will. So I mean, like it took me a while. What I mean? To kind of run that whole like evolution down as far as like the years and with change and all that. But I think it was just, I tried to make it as brief as possible. And it was important to do that because it's like even with all them differences and how much things have changed, it's like there's always that saying, what I mean, that I hear from time to time. The more things change, the more they stay the same, and that can definitely be true in some cases. And I think it's certain things that like no matter what's going on, as far as like people's preferred um, method of how they listen to music or how they promote music, I think it's just all going to come down to the same general concept of like you just have to find the people that's into what you into, or what you making, better yet. What I mean? You gotta find the people that's into what you making and have an interest for your type of music, and you just gotta keep feeding them. What I mean? And it's like I got to a point where I don't really so much focus on trying to get everybody. I'm just trying to get the people that I know is into the lane that I'm in. What I mean? So and I just try let that shit go organically from there. But just as far as like general topic of evolution though, and just how things change throughout the years, it's always gonna happen. What I mean? The best thing you can do is really just try to acclimate as fast as possible, and still remain remain an individual. Don't get too caught up in trying to keep up with what's going on. Like learn how things are going and adjust your position to be able to be a part of it, but at the same time stand as an individual. What I mean? So I think nobody should really feel bitter. Nobody should feel like they're gonna fail because things are different. Nobody should be discouraged, man. It's just like when things change, you just have to acclimate and adapt and do the best you can in all cases, man. It's been another episode of Not the Average Local Rapper, hosted by yours truly, Eshaw Ridge. If you made it to the end, I appreciate you. And I will catch you on the next one, man.